Ellie, okay, I'm convinced. They convinced me. He wore the silk pajamas and he was not wearing something else that perhaps he should have been wearing. But having sex with an adult film star, that's not illegal, nor is paying her for her silence. So where are we on the important matter of Trump's intent?
So, Michael, the key thing to keep in mind here, as you say, wearing silk pajamas, not a crime. Having sex with a porn star, not a crime. Paying hush money, not a crime. Knowing about paying hush money, not a crime. The charged crime here is falsification of business records. And to that end, I think prosecutors have made slow but steady progress, but they're not quite all the way there yet. And the person who's going to need to get them all the way there is Michael Cohen. And here's what I mean. I think it's quite clear, based on the evidence we've seen so far, A, that Stormy Daniels was paid $130,000 hush money. No question. B, that Donald Trump was aware of that. C, that Donald Trump knew he was reimbursing Michael Cohen over the subsequent months. But what you have to show is that Donald Trump was in on a plan to falsify business records. Let's set this up. Let's structure the internal accounting on this to hide it, to make it look like legal fees as opposed to a hush money payment. That's where the prosecution hasn't quite driven it home. That's where they need Michael Cohen to deliver for them this week.
So perhaps you are now about to school me as a criminal litigator. My expertise is in the civil realm. Lots of salacious information came in relative to Stormy Daniels. I don't understand it. And 2 times Judge Merchan would not grant a mistrial. But in his second explanation, I'm going to put up on the screen what was said at sidebar. Judge Merchan to, here it is, to Blanche. In your opening statement, you deny that there was ever a sexual encounter between Stormy Daniels and the defendant. Your denial puts the jury in a position of having to choose who they believe, Donald Trump, who denies there was an encounter, or Stormy Daniels, who claims that there was. Ellie, an opening statement is not evidence. Is it appropriate for Judge Merchan to say, well, in your opening, here's what you said, therefore you open the door?
So you're right. I think the statement by Judge Merchan is actually legally incorrect. The prosecution carries the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, always and forever. And for the judge to say this is going to come down to a contest of credibility before the jury, who's telling the truth, Stormy Daniels or Donald Trump, that's just not correct. That if Donald Trump doesn't take the stand, and I don't think he will take the stand, it's not for the jury to say, well, who do I believe more? It's for the jury to say, has the prosecution proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt? And let me put that in another way to you. A lot of people have said, well, Michael Cohen, maybe he's a liar, but Donald Trump's a liar too. So what? If the jury concludes they're both big fat liars, which might be the case, guess what the verdict is? Not guilty. So I actually think the judge misstates the burden of proof in that excerpt you just showed us.
Okay, and you anticipated my next question, because when Judge Merchan talks about whose account do we believe, Stormy Daniels or Donald Trump, I think he's saying it's a case about sex. It's not a case about sex.
Right. So this was a difficult line for prosecutors to walk here. I do think they needed to call Stormy Daniels, not as a technical matter, but as a human matter, as explaining the case to the jury. I think it would have been really conspicuous if they had not called Stormy Daniels. Now, when they got too deep, I think, into the salacious details of the sex, and the judge did sustain several objections from Trump's team about the details, I guess the upside is the more details that Stormy Daniels gives tends to make her more credible, right? If she just said, well, I had sex with him in a hotel room in 2006 and that's it, that's not all that credible. But if she says, oh, I remember the magazine he was holding, I remember the pajamas, you tend to believe it more. The downside for prosecutors, though, is you get away from the ball. You get away from the ball game here, which is falsification of business records. And the more time you spent in silk pajamas in that hotel room, the more the jury may be wondering, wait a second, the charge here is accounting, essentially. So why are we spending so much time in detail in this hotel room? It's a tough call for prosecutors. I think they were right to call Stormy Daniels, but I think they went too far into the nuances of it.
How much of this now rests on the shoulder, the successful prosecution, that rests on the shoulder of Michael Cohen?
I would say virtually all of it, Michael. And I want to say this. Michael Cohen is a unique witness, right? He has a history of lying unlike any witness that I've ever seen. He has a personal hatred for Donald Trump beyond what I've ever seen from any witness taking the stand against a defendant. I mean, 2 days ago, he did a video where he's wearing a goofy t-shirt showing Donald Trump in an orange jumpsuit behind bars. That's going to come back to haunt him. But on the other hand, prosecutors have done a really good job, I think I coined a term this week, pre-corroborating Michael Cohen. A lot of what he's going to testify about, not all of it, but a lot of it, they've already heard. They've already seen checks. They've seen handwriting on the internal accounting documents. They've heard from other witnesses. And so a lot of what they're going to hear from Michael Cohen, and prosecutors will argue just this in closing, they're going to say, folks, you don't need to take Michael Cohen at his word because virtually everything he says is backed up. But the key point, did Donald Trump know, hey, we're going to falsify these records. We're going to call them attorney's fees to try to hide them. That little nuance is going to be the difference and the game changer and the one that should determine the verdict. And I think that in isolation can only come